Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm going to set down my drink over here. Nice to see you. And thank you, Nicole, for that nice introduction. We are Kris and Lara. I'll let Lara introduce herself, and then I will from there.
Thank you so much for having us today. My name is Lara. I work on the project management side, more product expert territory in the BOSS Cubez. Work closely with Kris, and I work more on like the project execution and launch and making sure that we get people, into these communities. So that's what I do, and I'll pass it over to Kris.
Yeah, thank you, Lara. I'm Kris Van Glesen. I was actually born here in San Francisco and grew up most of my life in Sonoma County, where my family still is. Went to school at Cal in the East Bay, and then ended up back in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, where I worked in politics and enjoyed my time there, and made my way back to California. And my wife and I have lived back in San Francisco for more than 25 years. We have two kids who were born, raised here. Now they're just out of college. That's how it happens. And I love this city. This has always been the place I have felt the most kinship with, and even more so these last 4 or 5 years of transition and challenges, and finding myself in a role now that really has the opportunity to make a difference, not just here, but in California and beyond, has been wonderful. And working with Lara and the rest of the team at BOSS has really made that possible. And my inspiration really, Nicole and I talked a little bit about that, comes from growing up in a family with 4 siblings and parents who were always focused on the community and nonprofits and giving back and doing things. I think it carried me, certainly through college and into the political environment. Maybe hasn't always driven the most financially beneficial career decisions, but that is far outweighed by the work that I've had the opportunity to do over a long period of time. So thanks for having us here. We have a presentation that I think you'll find interesting. You may know some of this, and I think some of it you won't. And so hopefully you'll learn something. I guess the format is to ask questions at the end, Nicole, or during, or I'm pretty casual, so whatever works.
Yes, so I think we'll go through the presentation and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. We are live streaming, so if you do have a question, please raise your hand and I will come pass the microphone to you.
Wonderful. Well, let's get going. I think one of the things that we all understand is that we come to this homelessness issue, environment, challenge with some preconceived notions. I think it's natural, it's normal. I've learned a great deal during my time, but I think it's important to point things out and to kind of address some of them. One of the first things that we all hear or say sometimes is that, well, people come here. We hear that a lot from out of state. They come to California because it's great weather, because we are liberal and we have a lot of resources. The fact of the matter is that about 90%, according to the UCSF Benioff Homeless Housing Initiative, which many of you know and came out recently, says that 90% of those who are unhoused here are from California. 75% live in the same county now where they previously were housed, and 65% born in California. The reason people are becoming homeless here is not because they've moved here and started living outdoors. It's because it is too expensive. We know that housing is a challenge. That's why folks ended up in that situation. And so I just think it's important to point that out. It's not the weather or the liberal environment, it is the cost of living. And it spiral, as we know, that people are challenged month to month, can't pay rent, maybe get another month, end up in a car, sell the car, and find themselves homeless. So that's the first thing. The second one, everyone on the streets is addicted to drugs. How many times have we heard that? And the mental illness. And people are more likely, that is absolutely true, to experience addiction and mental illness on the streets. But that does not necessarily mean that it affects everyone, the two of those challenges, even though there's prevalence. We know from these same studies, 27% folks said they have been hospitalized at some point for a mental health challenge, and a third of them have attempted suicide. On the drug side, 50% of folks have admitted their use of amphetamines, less using cocaine, and even less in opioids. But obviously, mental health and drug addiction are a challenge on the street, but not perhaps what many people think it is. The other, one of the next ones you hear about the veterans on the street. Yes, there are many veterans disproportionately represented on our streets in California. But over a 12-year period from 2011 to 2023, that dropped by more than a third, and more work to be done. A lot of you know about Proposition 1, Governor Newsom's bill that barely passed. Thankfully it did. Included in that are 4,400 new beds, of which half of those are going towards veterans. So there is work going on. That $6.4 billion initiative will help our veterans and will address those issues, and as they should. If we're not going to be able to house our veterans and help our veterans, who are we going to help? This is it is a situation that's solvable, but it's one that we have to deal with. People on the streets don't want to work, and they don't work. Well, that's not true. Some people are holding down 1 or 2 jobs. Others are looking for work. In the survey we mentioned, where the Benioff UCSF folks were talking to individuals, 25% in the previous month were earning income in a job. So, but it's the problem is what? Nobody's making enough money to do that. The average median job at a fast food restaurant, as an example, $17.32 is less than half needed to rent a 1-bedroom apartment. It's no surprise. People are working, people are looking for work, but it's not ever nearly enough. Unhoused people don't want shelters and housing. That's another myth, right? There's plenty of options. They just don't want them. Not true. Most people do want to go inside, but they need to be met halfway, right? There is a propensity to kind of say, well, we have shelters, we have gyms, we have these barracks for people. And the reality is there's a lot of questions there. How long can somebody stay, right? We know they're dangerous places. They just are, especially for women. Community Forward SF, which is a wonderful organization here in San Francisco dealing with housing for women, abused women, shelter. Their own numbers say that every night, 2,400 women in this city of 850,000, 2,400 women choose to sleep on the streets and bushes somewhere rather than go into one of the many shelter environments that are provided. Why? Because they're dangerous, because there's rape and sexual assault, because they can't bring their pets, because their items are stolen. There's no storage. Couples are separated, right there. So the fact that we say that people don't really want to house, go into the housing offered, it's all about what that looks like, right? And when offered shelters that meets those needs or meets halfway, they're more likely to accept it. We found that during COVID-19, a lot of people are familiar with the Room Key project, right? And that was very successful. It got people off the streets into an environment that was safe. They had their own locking door, and that was an extremely successful project. One of the co-authors of an analysis of that said that people will come indoors if offered autonomy, safety, privacy, if they can keep their partners, their pets, and their possessions. And I would just add to that, and one thing that we really believe in at BOSS is their dignity, right? Dignity. We all want dignity. We all want a roof. We want safety, of course, but a dignified environment is always at the top of my list. And the last one I'll go through really quickly is we all feel good about dropping food off at a shelter or an encampment. And this maybe isn't so much of a myth, but it was part of this list that I thought was pretty interesting. And one of the things there that is a problem is that it's more about what's left over in our meal or feel good, but in reality often it creates issues, rodents, and a garbage environment that ironically gets swept out and encampments kind of get moved out. And that is one area where the suggestion is to work closer with the operators there. So Anyway, just a few myths about kind of things I frankly learned in my work over the last couple of years. Let me say really briefly about BOSS. It is an acronym, and it stands for Built on Site Systems. Founded a little over 4 years ago, YPO is Young Presidents Organization. It was founded by leaders of a YPO organization that said, we need to solve something. Everything's shut down. Oh my God, what is happening to our homeless population? It is unconscionable and something we should be able to think about and do something about. And it exacerbated our homelessness. But one thing I want to make really clear is we believe, and many others believe, this is a very solvable issue. The numbers say so, right? Sure, 650,000 in the United States sounds like a lot of people, up 12% over 2022. In California, almost a third of the population. But if we can't solve this issue, are we really going to be known as the generation that couldn't figure out how to house 180,000 people in California and 650,000 across the country? It is solvable. There are many solutions. We don't stand here today saying that BOSS, Built on Site Systems, is the only way to solve this. That's the beauty of people like Dan and others in this room, and Paul. There are so many great things going on, and that's the best part of all, right? It is solvable, but it's going to take a lot of people to do it, and that's why we feel so excited about what's going on in addressing this issue. BOSS was a company that was leveraged from decades of work in manufacturing. This part of that large global company just began, as I said, 4 years ago out of Southern California. BOSS, an offshoot, was founded by Lara, and her co-founder has the same last name, her father, Viken, who is an amazing man. And Viken and the founder of Dignity Moves were on that YPO group together, and they're the ones who started this conversation, and that's how it kind of blossomed from there. So our first community was here in San Francisco at 33 Gough Street. I worked with Dignity Moves for a year and a half and loved the people. I think Elizabeth Funk may have spoken to this group. I live 5 blocks from her in the city. Joanne and the whole team, wonderful group that we still work closely with. I had the opportunity to go and work with Viken and Lara and BOSS, and it's been a wonderful partnership to continue working with Dignity Moves. They are ethos, values driven at Dignity Moves, just as we are at BOSS. That really was the foundation of this company, and the reason that it started was to live those values, solve problems, and to address this terrible issue that is that has plagued our entire state, and obviously beyond that. So the last thing I'll say here, and then we'll move on to a few more specifics, is that we are very proud about a statewide partnership that we have with Governor Newsom's office for the next 2 to 4 years. We are a prime partner in the manufacture of our homes, which you'll see a few of here, in that they did a painstaking process to say everybody who would be interested in this submit 450 pages, which Lara took over 3 months to do so. But the outcome was a selection that now any city in California does not have to go through a laborious RFP process or a costly one that delays what? Delays getting people off the streets and saving lives. They can simply go to the state and say, okay, you've done all the work, you've vetted all these, you know what the best opportunity is, and place an order. And so we have found that, not from a business standpoint, but from a solvability of this issue, that has been very powerful. And so we're proud of it, but it's also been something that's been great for addressing what we're trying to accomplish. So last thing, really quickly, I talk constantly, I did Dignity Moves, there's no surprise, politics, land, and funding, right? Those are the things. You can have, if you don't have all three of those, you will not be successful. You can find land in a city, you can even find money, but if the politicians are saying, not in my backyard, let's get those people outside of town, we have land there, not going to work. If you have the politics on your side and the money, but literally there's nowhere to build or nowhere to find land. That's hard. And of course, money and funding speaks for itself, right? Some things just going on. I mentioned Prop 1, Newsom's mental health overhaul. That's huge. That's huge for what we're trying to address with more housing, I mentioned, for the veterans and others. This 1,200 Newsom home project you may have seen last year, where they said we're going to give LA 500, we're going to pay for 500 homes in LA, 300 I think in San Jose, 200 maybe in 200 in Sacramento, and whatever's left, San Diego County, which maybe a couple hundred more. We are building the homes, BOSS is currently this very moment in Sacramento. Dan went over and saw some of what's going on. So we're part of that program. And again, other organizations are part of the LA or the San Jose one. We're not doing that. Great. We love that. You get more people involved, more in the ecosystem, more people understanding the work that's going on, right? I don't know if folks have followed the Martin versus Boise and the Grants Pass ruling by our Supreme Court. But basically, what that has done is thrown the protections that were in place, where you aren't going to criminalize the homeless by removing them and putting them, incarcerating or worse. What was challenged and unfortunately overturned was this idea that if you don't have a place to go live, you cannot be moved and, as I said, criminalized because of you're homeless and you don't have anywhere else to go. Now, with that decision, things are going to change a bit. This Interim Housing Act, Senate Bill 1395, is one of those things that is moving quickly through that will address some of these emergency housing initiatives. And I won't go too deep into that, but right now, some of those things are in motion till 2026, as I say. This would extend it another decade. Senator Becker from the South Bay, the chair of that committee, former mayor of Berkeley, Skinner, I think, and she and her committee are really pushing on this. It's a wonderful opportunity to extend out some of these protections. So with that, I thought maybe Lara, do you want to speak to some of the things with BOSS and kind of what led to where we are today? And this gets into a little bit more about the founding, but also actually what we're doing. And we have a very short video, but it'll give you a sense of what's going to happen in Oakland in a couple months at Dan and Paul and Marta and Al's project and all of your project, kind of give you a sense of how it works in real time. So with that, I'll let Lara speak because you've heard a lot of me right now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll just jump in here with talking about traditional temporary housing. Kris touched on this, but shelters, 100 people in a big gym or something like that is kind of more of the traditional approach to housing people that are on the streets. And unfortunately, it is crowded. There's no privacy, no door locks, very dangerous space. So we really wanted to give people a place to call home, somewhere where they can lay down and rest for the evening, close their door, go to work, come back, and kind of restart their lives. So that's what BOSS Cubez was kind of built on, and the product itself is designed for dignity. So we have heavy-duty steel walls and roofs, vaulted 8.5-foot high ceilings. When you walk in, it really does not feel claustrophobic at all. It's very spacious, and the insulation levels are quite high: R17 for the walls and R21 for the roof. Double pane aluminum windows. And we took careful consideration the California building structural requirements. We really wanted these buildings to be extremely safe and to also meet the Title 24 requirements that are mandatory in California. So we meet those requirements. Fire is a big concern in some of the communities that we build, so we made sure that our buildings are FM approved. They have a Class 1 fire rating, which is the highest fire rating that you can get for building materials. We have ADA ready options. The buildings themselves, they are temporary, but they do have a 20+ year lifespan. So they're going to be there for as long as someone might need them. They're durable, hygienic, dignified spaces, and we also have optional private bathrooms, depending on the people. So We have sizes to meet every need. So something that we pride ourselves in is that we are kind of a one-stop shop. So if someone's trying to build a community, we have land, we have political, willpower, we have the funding, and the idea is who are we going to go to build this community? We are the place that you can go to get the rooms, the bathrooms, the community spaces, offices, laundry rooms, anything that is needed to make this place feel home. So we have over 50 different products. Super easy delivery. The built on site system kits show up to the job site, similar to this. Think of it like large scale IKEA. Come in, you have your installation manual. Super easy installation. 3 people, 2 days. Dan, you saw this firsthand the other day. We've even had volunteers put these cubes together, so they're very easy. Nothing super like we don't need contractor experience to build one. And then we can show you the installation video so you can see. This is this community involvement park was specifically for families experiencing homelessness. So you can see the bunk beds for the kids. I made a little debut in that one. Yeah. So we were talking about land before, and land is sometimes hard to come by. So sometimes the lease can be for 3 years, for 5 years. Sometimes we get really lucky and the lease can be for 20 years. But in cases when maybe you find land and you can lease it for 2 years, and the thought is, okay, what are we going to do with the cubes after that? They're forkliftable, so you can preserve 75% of the initial community build investment and essentially just pick these cubes up, put them on a truck, and take them to the next site. Speed and scalability. The question I get all the time is, okay, if I come to you with an order of 200 or 50, or what if I come to you with an order of 1,000? Can you keep up with that manufacturing capability? And the answer is yes. So we have highly automated assembly lines. We work with big, you can see this factory here. We work with big factories that have the capacity that we really need to solve this problem in the state of California and across the nation. Sustainability. As manufacturers, we know that we need to reduce our carbon footprint. So we use recycled plastics in the insulation in our walls. So this is actually pictures outside of some of the factories. These are ground down and used in the insulation. Fire safety. I had mentioned before that this is a really important topic. We have taken extensive steps to get testing done on our panels. You can see a picture here of, this is a very rudimentary test, but we've done ASTM E119 fire tests, which are multifamily apartment building regulations, and we have passed those. And that allows us to build communities with high density. So in some of these communities, we can build these only 5 feet apart. or 10 feet apart in some cases. With our product, we can build right next to each other, which allows us to house more people on the same land.
Yeah, anybody who's been to our 33 Golf site with Dignity Moves, or some others, actually the one just opened in the spring in the Mission, 16th and Mission cabins, we'll see that they look back to back. It's 2 units together, but because of that ability from the fire marshal saying, absolutely, what you have done to test these, we're very comfortable with them being side by side, which of course allows you to house more people, which is significant versus maybe a 6-foot divide, which other manufacturers do because they don't have the same. There's a question in the back. Yes, sir.
Can you stack them?
So these buildings are 1 story. The way that the panels are built are for emergency 1 story. We do have permanent housing, which is kind of a little bit of a different path that is stackable.
Okay, similar, like very economic cost point with the stackable stuff.
Not the same price point. These are more permanent housing, about 2 times the cost.
Okay, that's still way below other manufacturing.
Thank you for the question. We talked to, oh, another question. Sorry. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. It's not IKEA related, I promise. So I love IKEA. So I'm interested in, because I know that you're working in terms of the political footprint, which is so important for doing the thing. Half of it is getting the people to do the thing. And I'm really interested in this particular category as opposed to the permanent typology that you talked about, because since this has a 20-year lifespan, I'm thinking that I'm aware of a few legislative initiatives that are moving forward in order to reclassify these sorts of temporary structures as permanent. So are those parts of conversations that you're a part of? Because then it effectively becomes hybrid, where it's not permanent, but because of the lifespan, it can also function as permanent.
Yeah, that is key of a lot of the lobbying and conversations going on in Sacramento right now to extend that, to understand these are not things that were just thrown up as a shipping container and cut in half and said, okay, that's housing, right? The energy that Viken, the co-founder, is an electrical engineer and by trade and MBA, and Lara, who's also an engineer, and our team was really about, let's focus on everything we've talked about so that we have a product that can withstand the, well, we've always done it this way. Well, this is no longer the way that it has been done. It's now a new direction forward. And you're right, matching up Sacramento and the political will and getting champions, which we have up there, and Dignity Moves is playing a huge role in pushing this forward. Elizabeth Funk and Joanne Price and the crew, the folks there. There's a lot of push and support. A lot of business communities in San Francisco and the Bay Area, of course, want the policies to reflect where the housing has come from and where it's going. So really important to find that. And as you said, a hybrid solution hopefully is where we end up. Yeah, one more question or another question? There's not as many as you want.
Just curious. Oh, I might have a longer one later, but a little bit.
No problem.
But, I was going to ask, was there kitchens in these buildings, or is there like a communal kitchen for these kind of?
It depends on the site that we're building. In some cases, there's a communal kitchen, and that really promotes socializing in the community. That works really well. In other communities, people might not be as mobile, maybe for the elderly or something like that, where we have little kitchenettes in the buildings themselves.
Yeah, really quick. I know this is a longer term question, but I've heard about like trailer parks that also have issues with elderly that live there, where the land becomes expensive, so that even if you own your own site or building, your own house or something, that they make the land very expensive. So what is there things in the pipeline to work on making land either more affordable to be owned by the people, so to speak, or that live on the site? Or...
No, it's a great question. Yeah, and mobile home parks are an interesting dynamic of how that all works. I think what our focus has really been, I know Dignity Moves and others, is to, out of the gate, you want your political will and your politicians and your local leaders to understand and to really, really appreciate what you're trying to do. And part of that is, let's not load up all the costs on building these things, and a huge cost of that is the land, right? And so what we've found, and what Dignity Moves has found and others, is, well, first of all, every politician is motivated by one thing: re-election, right? We know that, and that's not a bad thing, especially when it comes to this. So right now, there's a huge motivation to address this issue, right? Find the funding, have the political will. Santa Barbara County is a great example. You wouldn't believe the first of 3 communities that we helped build down there, literally right next to I think it's Merrill Lynch high net worth individual office building. Do you think they were enthused about building on the unused parking lot that jurors would use to go to the courthouse right across the street? They were not. But the ability to see how it changes your community overnight, which it did, getting people who were homeless previous to move indoors, bless you again, not only changes that community, but gives the political will and capital that those supervisors, all 5 of them, got on board. And then it led to 2 other communities. And so I think we look for the political will, but also on the land question, give us the land for free. $1 a year, let us lease this land. That's why it's so important, as Lara said, that we build these structures that can be movable, very easily movable, because you lead with that. You may want your land back in 5 years. Let us lease from you. You have all the upside of this, or private, not just government. We have the private landowner, this one in San Francisco, high benefit on his taxes to be able to donate that land basically over a period of time. So there's a lot of incentive to not pay for land, and hopefully that's asking your question, to really be creative about where you do it. Not just the land, but as I said, where you do it. You'd be surprised where you think, how do you put houses in there? There's a community over in Alameda that Dignity Moves was involved with, near the community college, that is on a very interesting space right behind the football field at the community college. But it works because somebody said, I think we can build housing here and change the lives of 60 people. So, yeah. Let me just go through really quick some of the communities. We won't belabor it because there's a lot, and that's what's been exciting here over the last couple of years. But the first one, our friends at Tree Ring Village. I know this is, yes. I know this is in motion, and Dan sent me a note last night that Marta was working on an update to the update, but I think this is fairly updated and an idea that still reflects some of the ring aspect, but with the reality that there are some perimeter buildings. I won't go too deep into this. You guys probably know more about this than I do, but we are really honored. We first met Dan last year, had the opportunity to meet on some of the sites, actually when I was with Dignity Moves, and he's been to some of our other sites with his team. In fact, just yesterday, Lara's spearheading a 60-home new project on Gerald Avenue down in the produce district here in San Francisco, working with ACE, HSH, and Dan and Al came over just to see what's going on and to get a sense of how it all works. And so we couldn't be more enthused and honored to partner with you and Paul and your team. And so it's exciting. Yeah, I heard Nicole mention Q1. Oh, yes, that's our goal. Absolutely. So,
And Dan, is there anything you'd like to share as we're on the slide?
yeah.
Yeah, firstly, thank you, Lara and Kris. Super informative presentation. And yeah, one thing we're working on with our design is to try to integrate nature within the community. And can't be seen too well, but there's a couple veggie beds in the center, and then trees as well. And then on the homes, to kind of naturally paint the homes, Al came up with a really interesting idea that is to have trellises on each side of the homes with plants running up, and they'll be good for the ecosystem in addition to just creating life for the homes. And yeah, just really excited to collaborate.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it's great.
thanks
And
again.
so, and the focus of women and housing is just wonderful, right? very needed. So anyway, thanks, Dan. Let's keep moving here. This is 33 Goff again, city of San Francisco. These were tents on this lot we've probably been by a million times, and came in and said, let's look at it differently. So it's kind of two parcels started, and really took it the first phase. They took 44 tents and put in 42 homes, and then up to 80. And right now, more projects working with HSH. There's been two more and more in the works. We're excited about that. There before and after. One thing we learned on both BOSS and Dignity Moves was optimally you don't build on a slope. But sometimes you just have to build where you can. So this was a slope. This has been phenomenally successful. And again, just these little touches you see. And this was the first project. We've learned a lot. And you'll see in the next ones maybe an upgrade. But giving people a front porch, a doormat, a place to sit, a plant, so valuable in creating that dignity in these lives, because they've been through a lot. And inside the rooms, we've kind of seen that. Santa Barbara, I mentioned it. This is the one that was right next to the high net worth building. Let's take it from a parking lot into a dwelling. About $50,000 a bed. That's all in. That's not for a bed. That's not just for our building, but that's kind of everything inclusive, right? And that's pretty good from what we've learned. But build this amazing project. You want to build a site in these communities where there may be pushback that fits, right? That looks like it belongs. Santa Barbara, you can walk by literally and not notice that behind that wooden door there are people whose lives are healing and moving forward. And so this was an important part of it. There's Merrill Lynch right there at the top looking down. They became very good volunteers and donors. So that again, going back to my myths about the unhoused, we all learn, and the great news is they were willing to have open minds and support. So each door is, just real quick, each door has their own locking door. Huge. We see people sleeping during the day that are unhoused. They've been drinking. No, they do not want to sleep at night. The fear that is there for closing your eyes. So the sleep comes often during the day. The ability for somebody to go in their own home with their doorstep, lock the door from the inside, have Wi-Fi, AC, heat, a bed, a dresser. You can't imagine that, and what that does for people and their dignity and their ability to just stabilize, right? You can't expect people to move their lives forward if they're constantly moving around every day. And so to provide that is obviously phenomenal. We talked a little bit about the larger buildings. We also manufacture spaces for congregation of eating, of study hall, back to college, of computer labs where people can work on job training or getting their documentation in order, driver's license, whatever it is, a place to commune, to have a television, to watch a game, to have some food, right? And that's important. And then the last one, we saw this one. This was that site, as Lara said, was for families experiencing homelessness. Who knows the answer to this one? What's the number one demographic right now that is growing, experiencing homelessness within our, youth or single women with children, older? I'm sure all those categories, right? But what we've heard is that senior citizens. I mean, how tragic is that? And I think I just mentioned that because, of course, families as well. And Lara, you said there, it's not just what we might think is mothers with kids. It's sometimes fathers with kids or full families. Yeah.
Or a woman who are just having their first baby, just single mother, sometimes like that.
Yeah. So this was Baldwin Park, and again, you can kind of just see. And really quickly, a lot going on. We mentioned earlier this year, 2 more in Santa Barbara we've been excited to work on. And after today, if people want to go 1979 Mission Street at 16th and Mission, San Luis Obispo, you can see up in Eureka. So the good news is there's a lot of opportunity to help in these communities. The bad news is there's a lot of opportunity to help. There's a lot of need, right? We know that. But we're excited about that, and also very busy upcoming summer. We mentioned those California State cabins. We're working up in Sacramento. We're talking Los Angeles right now, San Francisco. Sacramento has a huge focus up there. We're actually, people have reached out from other parts of the country, and then just a few other sites as well. So those are just some of the service providers we've worked with, CityNet, some of the builders, some of the cities themselves, our good friends at Dignity Moves. A lot of the developers are key to this ecosystem and their involvement and engagement. So that's the slideshow. I just have one more thing I was going to convey, but are you sure? Okay. All right. Well, one of the things that Nicole had mentioned, kind of a traditional, or something you do perhaps here, is, what do you call it, Nicole?
A story of hope. And I am excited to hear the story of hope that you'd like to share.
Yes. It relates to the mission project that was just completed in the spring, but that goes back a couple of years. And when I first started at Dignity Moves, we knew that there were things happening in the mission, but why I love this city is there was a community meeting to discuss it, right? And that first meeting I attended was in a church not far from 16th and Mission. And the supervisor, who is down in that district, who many of you may know, Hillary Ronan, District 9, she was heading up this hearing and or this community meeting. And it was vicious. It was really hard to be in the room. Hillary, Supervisor Ronan, has, I think, been a great friend to the mission in a very difficult part of town during a very difficult period of time. And she, like others in their districts, looking at options of ways they can kind of change what's happening around them. So this site was identified. It is a schoolyard that hasn't been used for a long time, city-owned, right next to a elementary school. So we talk about those misconceptions about homelessness, but never to discount what people are feeling. In these meetings, people living in the mission, raising their kids and families in the mission, vehemently opposed to this community, understandably. But what stuck with me were the personal barbs and attacks and just lining up at a microphone. And she took it well and answered as best as possible. One of her takeaways was, I want to do it in the mission, but I'm calling on my other supervisors. Let's all do one of these in their district, which, politics always plays a role, right? But back to the story about, I won't go too much longer, but the story of hope and kind of what I saw that night. I had a chance to meet in that room, in the back of the room, was a couple, man and a woman, who, as it turned out, were homeless. And I engaged them and spoke to them, and it was hard to watch because their people were talking openly, not really knowing who's in the room, but assuming it's community members and whatever, but two homeless folks who lived in that community on the streets were hearing a lot of this and couldn't understand the denigration, but also kind of the opposition to providing hope and an opportunity for them. And that was the irony. I went to 3 more of those meetings. I saw them at one more, had a similar conversation, but the meetings were starting to change a little bit. Flash forward, however long that was, till when it was approved, and we were asked to, the boss was asked to provide the homes in the other buildings. We went to the opening. You guys know where this ends, I'm sure, but we went to the opening that day, which was beautiful. Dan was there with Paul and a few others, I think, right? Anybody else in the room who was there? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Hello. Nice to see you. And it was great. We had Director McSpadden from HSH and Emily Cohen, who works with her, and the supervisor. And a great outpouring of community support. Some of those people that had been lined up were there, very enthused. And again, never to discount those feelings, but I think we and they worked through it and created a beautiful site. And yes, I looked up as we were kind of milling around, and I saw the couple who I had met in the church. And they were very emotional because they had found out that they would be moving in to that community that just 9 months or a year, whatever it was, I forget the timing, they had been witnessing this very community basically saying, we do not want this. These people are unsafe. Our kids go to school here. And it was just a beautiful moment, not only on that level, but also to understand that this works. The community works. People having conversation works. It's something we all hope happens at a much more national level, and we're in the middle of that right now. But this in San Francisco on that day was my story of hope, because I didn't expect them there. I didn't even think about them until I saw them, and then in that moment it all kind of hit home that the work we do and that all of you do is so important to help literally save lives. So with that, I will conclude our presentation. We are so delighted, Nicole, that you invited us to come. We do miss Paul today. He was funny last week. We just committed last week. He said, hey, I know Dan had talked to you about coming on these things. How about next week? I'm like, yeah, I can come next week. And then after I said, for sure, he said, oh, one thing, I'm not going to be there. So Paul, we missed you. But thanks, Nicole, and to Paul for all his support with Tree Ring Village and this organization, and Dan and Marta, Al, everyone else on the team. Thanks for having us, and would be delighted to come back in the future. So
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Lara and Kris. You're doing incredible work. It's an absolute honor to partner with you on this project that's very dear to all of our hearts. Something that has started out as an idea, and to see it really manifest into reality has been a pleasure. And I know Dan has really enjoyed partnering with you, felt a lot of confidence in the work that you're doing. So thank you so much. So I think now we can open it up for a few questions. We'll start with Yaniv.
Thank you guys so much for coming today. Such a great presentation, and the work you guys are doing is just incredible. I think you really identified like one of the core things that was really needed, and the way that you tackled it, scaled it up. I think it was really remarkable work. So thank you. I have two questions. First is, do you have any advice? I guess you've worked with a few of these communities now on site selection, like anything specific we should be looking at for sites, for new projects, ideal dimensions, ideal number of units, anything like that?
I mean, and Lara may have some thoughts. I think the one thing I've learned in the last couple of years is, we really say it, if you can, in a perfect world, find a place, a community, a neighborhood where there are people who are unhoused and needing help, it often feels like the right location, with obviously no blinders on, understanding the environment. But I think you have a community that's going to be very supportive, because selfishly or not, they're going to clean up their environment, which they're probably motivated to do. But it also speaks to where the unhoused community is comfortable, right? And I think we found that in speaking and in having these opportunities to meet with people who maybe become housed. I think there are reasons, right? And of course, the natural things near transportation, because most people aren't going to have a car, and then of course the political will. I mean, it would be hard to build a East Bay community in Piedmont, just because it probably wouldn't have the same support as maybe something that's closer to the lake. Or so I think it's in answer to your question, I think finding a place where we see the unhoused has been a real key for a lot of the sites that Dignity Moves has been involved with, certainly that we've been involved with. And as to the size, we're focused on a community in Sacramento that we're building with 150 homes. Now, we don't have 150 homes side by side. So what we found is that, 40 to 50 in kind of their own neighborhood where you create, I don't have it up, but something in the middle that allows there to be, breakout areas. Obviously, a lot of open space. Sometimes you just don't have enough room for that, but I think dog runs, flower and vegetable gardens we've seen. The Alameda site has a beautiful place like that. The one in Santa Barbara we opened has a big open space for that. I think we find a lot of folks like that ability to nurture the soil and grow things. And so, just more land. We just got to find more land. But anyway,
and to answer that question a little more, technically,
engineer, non-engineer.
To have utilities on the land, something that is maybe like a parking lot that has asphalt already poured, makes it a lot easier to develop on. You won't have a lot of upfront construction costs to kind of make the land usable. So yeah, definitely, anything level is always useful.
I mean, we're finding right now the number of, we just drive down, sadly, in our downtown, the number of parking lots that are just, and at a minimum, the owner of that parking lot could, if enticed, could get a very nice tax write-off for 5 years or whatever that looks like. In LA, Dignity Moves has been talking to the community college of LA, I guess. They have a parking structure, multiple floors. I mean, on the roof of that is a perfect place. There's nobody's parked a car up there in 5 years, right? So what around us can we utilize that's not going to disturb the communities, that's a creative place that you'll get the support, right? And I think the place you guys have selected, it was a former gasoline station, been totally mitigated of any environmental concerns, but it's near a bus line. It's near some recent developments of housing. And it seems like it's a really great place, and I think we were fortunate to find it. But.
Awesome, thank you. And then you mentioned that the installation is something that's pretty easy to train for. I love these models that also kind of integrate and provide like work opportunities to employ people, maybe as a good first job, that sort of thing. Do you have any thoughts on having people who are going through the program, once they're through the program or during or something like that, actually getting trained up to do installation? What would the process look like for kind of quality control? You think you mentioned they don't have to be contractors, but to kind of make sure that everything was done properly, and do you feel like that could be a sort of scalable model?
Yeah, that's interesting you bring up. In Baldwin Park, actually, what we did was we kind of enrolled journeymen who are in their first year of training in the contractor world, and we enrolled them as one of their classes. It's a credit for them to come out and actually build this community. So it's definitely something that we've looked into. Typically, we send out project managers, sometimes myself, sometimes some of my coworkers, that go up for the first few days and make sure that the build is done correctly, and then we kind of leave it up to the leads and whoever has the contracting certification and ID number to kind of take it from there.
Are you saying that to do the installation you have to be a licensed contractor, or to do which parts of it?
So typically in these kinds of projects, you will have a licensed contractor that has bid to kind of do the project. There's a lot of civil work that needs to be done. There's a lot of like electrical work that needs to be done as well. So you'll have a licensed contractor for these projects anyway. And then what they can do is kind of supervise while you have journeymen or volunteers building units themselves.
Working with, we have partners who are service providers. Like in San Francisco, it's Urban Alchemy is a service provider. 5 Keys over in the East Bay, or Catholic Charities, or First Step Communities in Sacramento. And they also are really key to that kind of thought process. They have the local relationships. They know the politics. They know where funding is. They know the other agencies that they could bring in to, I think what you're saying is actually not just help build this, but provide training that then they could jettison into potential job opportunities or, something beyond that. And I think that's a wonderful opportunity. I know Dignity Moves has also talked a lot about that, and kind of that job training idea. So there was a couple questions in the all around. Sorry. whoever's next. Go ahead, sir.
Great.
And then,
Thank
sorry,
you.
back there after. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
coming and your presentation, the work you're doing. I don't agree with this point of view, but I've heard this point of view expressed, and I just wonder how you would answer this, which is some people say interim housing doesn't give enough dignity if it doesn't have a private bathroom and a kitchenette in the unit. I noticed you have that option with or without bath, but what do you say to people who are of that point of view? I don't necessarily agree with it, but I'd love to hear your answer.
No, I think the mayor of Los Angeles feels very strongly about that. We've heard that Mayor Bass is, with all that they're building down there, that's a priority. Now, they haven't built everything in suite. Of course, it's a function of cost, right? I mean, that's the first and foremost. Yes, unequivocally, I think if we had the ability to have every small home with their own shower, toilet, sink, especially the elderly, I mean, imagine getting up at night and go. So, yes, or families, but I think it's a function of cost more than anything else. I mean, Lara may have, and it's not exorbitant. Like we're working. We just price quoted somebody in Monterey area, Carmel, Monterey, on some units, and I was pretty pleased with the deal. Maybe you can just mention that one cost X, but when we added it, it was Y. It's not substantial, but it is significant. The last thing I'll say is some people say, well, it's maybe it's just talking points, but actually in the end, for people to have to come out of their home or their dwelling and interact is a good thing, right? And so if you have everything there and you just shut your door and you never come out, I don't know. They have wellness checks, of course, but know that the bathrooms that are built as the option for people and the showers are extremely, the ones we build are extremely secure, private. It's not an open environment where people come in and other people shower next door. So you have to be aware of creating an environment that's safe and secure. But that's how I would answer it.
Yeah, and I would just add to that an extra dimension. Sometimes you talk to these service providers and you ask, how does this work? How does this work for the residents? Does it work well? Does it not work well? And a lot of the feedback that we get is this is actually, the social aspect is so important to the mental health and the moving forward in life. And sometimes I actually talked to one service provider and they were explaining to me how it kind of feels like a college dorm situation. And if you think back on college, there was really only one way to make friends. You got to leave your room, and you meet them in the dining hall or in classes or something like that. So it really helps the mental health portion of the journey. So yeah, I think that it's great.
There's something way back there, and then here. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. As you're explaining the concept, I get it. I kind of want to get a visual of the sweet spot. So how many units are kind of the range that you want to create the community that you need to actually have the effect that you're hoping for, and then what percentage of that space is going to be common area versus individual units, and from that hopefully we can extrapolate what square footage you're looking for as the sweet spot range of the space.
Yeah, that's a great question. That question is kind of a function of land size, of cost, and of what do the California building codes say. So it's kind of all mixed together. But what we found is that communities are generally for 50 residents. That's kind of the average community that we build, and typically about 10% of the space is used for community spaces, dining halls, bathrooms, laundry rooms, this and that. And the rest of the space is used for individual rooms for the residents. So, yeah, and hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you again for this informative presentation. Minor bit of narrative yesterday as regards the aging population, the fastest growing population of our house, which are seniors. I helped someone navigate getting both of you ID card, state issued ID card, and food stamp card because he couldn't remember a lot of memory loss where he was spatially speaking. And the city services are not really set up for that. So part of our ministry, what I can do is I can just go with him walk with him to make sure he gets there. And then the questions are endless. Enter the last word for social. He can't remember, or he can't navigate. He can't functionally move his hands to press the button. All of those things are massive barriers to onboarding in the first place. And that experience with him yesterday, and I spent about 3 hours with him, but well worth the investment of time, because then he actually gets
Right.
right. And that experience, and then matched with what you're talking about today, leads me to be curious as to whether builders, and part of your work maybe in the future might be to build specific types of design to focus on persons suffering from memory care issues, because they will need spaces that are designed differently than people who are not going to get locked out all the time, or forget where the kitchen is, or whatever those issues might be.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether there's been any conversation about that. And then secondly, I will say, as a strong micro unit supporter, I lived for 2 years. Part of my lived experience, I lived for 2 years on our campus, which is a tiny house shelter for youth. I gleefully lived on campus for 2 years. Did not have my own bathroom. Had to walk outside to go to the bathroom. And it was useful for me to sort of think about what suite of amenities I wanted and needed versus did not need. And frankly, when I moved back to San Francisco at the beginning of May, I chose that I wanted central location in the Soma, but I did not want to pay $1,600 a month, which I could have qualified for. So I moved into an SRO, $825 a month. You couldn't blast me out of there with a nuclear bomb. And the bathroom, frankly, is closer than if I had a one-bedroom apartment, because it's literally right across the hall from my door. So I do think that there are design questions about not just for unhoused people, but also working class people, because in San Francisco, 40% plus of people are rent burdened. They cannot afford where they live. They just can't. And so micro design, I think, allows people to have different options if they want it, versus being able to price in at $1,500 a month for a studio apartment, which has been built a certain way. That also means that your electric bills are going to be higher. You're heating a bigger place. I got my first electric bill, it was $39, right? So ecology, sustainability, simplicity, all of those things. But I wonder whether you can speak a little bit about the first in terms of memory loss in the aging population.
Yeah, that's a great question. And what we do is, as we're evolving as a company, and as our product is shifting and changing to the different populations that we're working with, what we're doing is looking to consult with designers who have that psychological background. There are a lot of amazing architects out there that have actually done this work in spaces, institutional spaces, hospital spaces, different places that understand the psychology behind how people think who maybe might have memory loss or something like that. So the idea really is to bring those people on board with us, and in our next generation of products to start looking from that perspective, and bring designers on our team to help us with those designs.
Yeah, I'll take one last question and then we'll wrap it up. Ted, can you use your microphone?
I have a two-part question. Well, it's actually two questions.
This is how they get you right at the very end.
right at the
Things
end.
went okay, and now he's gonna.
No,
Go ahead.
The first one is, so 50 people is kind of a community, so that's maybe the sweet spot, or 50 and up. And you said you can build as many homes as you need. You can can scale up like you guys. I have a question though. On the small side, do you like if I'm thinking of churches, and maybe they want 3 homes? Do you guys do that too?
Yeah, as Kris always says, no project is too small.
Okay.
So
The church is the Yigby. Are you all familiar with the Yigby movement?
Yeah,
yes, in God's backyard.
Yeah.
Significant right now. Significant. Well, I was talking to Paul the other day about, his ecosystem and some of the things that he's interested in. But it feels like, to your question and what Lara said, yeah, we're constantly getting asked about that. 12, 10, 8, because you might think, well, it's not worth it. It's not going to pencil out. The beauty of what has been built in the manufacturing process is it can scale. It never missed a deadline because the comfort level of the scalability is such as 150 in Sacramento or a small 4 home community. In addition, there's a whole nother part of our company that is, it's called, you may think these are tiny homes, but it's actually called BOSS Tiny Homes. But people are coming to us to design and build 600 square foot, 800, 1,200 square foot homes. And just speaking to that those are one structure, right? And yes, they're bigger and probably more expensive, but it's not we just don't say, well, you got to have a minimum order of X. It just isn't how we are. But our ethos, I think, and our value system drives that. Because, yeah, if you sat back and said the time we're going to spend on that versus that, but it's never a thought there. Anytime we have an inbound interest in just finding out more about what we are doing and how we might be able to help somebody, we are on it. So, sorry.
You've kind of segmented into my second question, which is more a business angle. Like one of the reasons the housing, obviously it's the land cost, it's the primary driver behind housing, but also housing has not been touched by any of the major innovations in manufacturing. It's still doing the same things they were doing 30 years ago, and they haven't figured out how to manufacture stuff cheaper. I was just wanting you to speak into that. Like, are you guys thinking of down the future, how can we further innovate in our manufacturing process to keep being more like IKEA and drive the price lower and lower?
yeah, I actually love that you brought that up. That perfectly speaks to what Built On-Site Systems is all about. Cubes is a division of Built On-Site Systems. We also have homes and ADUs. And the whole idea is panelized technology and to build systems for single-family residences, for ADUs that are like large-scale IKEA, using conventional building materials, but that come together in a fraction of the time. So I'd love to talk to you, maybe separately, it could be a whole different conversation. But yeah, we have permanent housing with this same technology, panelized technology. So yeah.
Thanks again. If anybody, there's a brochure on the way out. If you want to take something, my business cards there. I think Lara as well. We're excited to continue to work with the group. I may just start coming on Wednesdays to get the lunch. I can walk down, but we really enjoyed our time, Nicole. I know we're up against it.
Thank you so much.
So.
No, thank you so much, Lara
Thank
and
you.
Kris.
Of course.
Please give them a big round of applause.